Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and I'm going to be guiding you through the world of emerging tech once again. But before I do, I've got a question for you. How is technology revolutionizing the way that you travel and the way that we all travel? Well, today we're going to be diving into the rapidly evolving landscape of airport biometrics with Jason, who is the Vice President of Advanced Recognition Systems at the NEC Corporation of America. Jason is at the forefront of integrating digital identity tools in airports globally, enhancing security and traveller convenience. And with the growing role of technologies like the traveller verification system, NEC is reshaping the travel experience. But I want to explore the opportunities and the responsibilities that come with these innovations and discuss the need for more robust government frameworks to ensure responsible use. But buckle up and hold on tight, because today I'm going to fly your ears all the way to Washington, D.C., where Jason is waiting to embark on a journey into the future of travel. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you remind everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me. My name is Jason Van Sice. I'm Vice President of Aviation for NEC America. Interestingly enough, I also work internationally across our country affiliates, as we call them, but basically you can think of those as NEC regions for anything identity and aviation focused. And my responsibility is the aviation business unit. So I have all of the personnel, sales, marketing, etc. under my authority.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with me today. And Jason, so with airport biometric use increasing, both in response to market demand and government direction, I'm curious, how do you see this technology transforming the travel experience in the near future?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Obviously, air travel is increasing. The populations are growing as people are able to now become a part of air travel, which in the past it was prohibitively expensive in many cases, with middle class growing in many countries. It really is going to require automation, and that digital transformation is where we're kind of very, very focused as an organization. Now, obviously with air travel, there's a key security component. So unique identities and things like biometrics are very, very important to enable that automation for travelers. The other thing that really is a focus area is customer experience. So I think the expectation of travelers today is we all have this ubiquitous mobile device as an example to inform us on many different things we do as a consumer. And I think in aviation space, it's very much a focus point to bring additional information and intelligence to not only the airlines and the airports, but also the consumer who's actually spending all of the money in those places.
And I'm glad you mentioned that expectation from consumers, because there's this great old quote that the last great experience anybody has anywhere becomes a standard expectation for what they expect everywhere. And amidst the operational challenges faced by airlines and airports, how do you see digital identity tools like those developed by NEC adding things like convenience and efficiency to the travel process? Because that's right at the heart of some of these experiences that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. So we try to view it as kind of two main areas, right? Which is, I would say, the operational side, which is what has been the focus point to date, I think, with many of the automation components, meaning biometrics used to board a plane, drop a bag, things along those lines, what we call passenger facilitation. But there's a whole another part of the airport that also is in the midst of digital transformation, which are areas like retail, hospitality, and a lot of those, what we call kind of stakeholder organizations are very much looking to participate in using digital identity as a way to secure transactions with their consumers. So much so that the airlines and some of these retailers are in discussions about how they can use a single identity that a customer may have control over to do these transactions, not only on that passenger facilitation side, but also on the consumer side, where they may be looking to have a meal or or buy some things in some of the stores in the airport. So those are very important areas. The other thing that is of a lot of focus for us is bringing AI into the equation. So I know that's a term that's being used a lot these days in the tech space, but really we're creating a lot of data off of these, what we call touch points. And that data is very valuable from the standpoint of giving kind of a characterization of an airport and its operations and where they might be able to improve things and consumer behavior. And it can be all non-attributional to really improve those areas for the consumer by looking at that data and, again, applying some machine learning and artificial intelligence to bring some of that proactive data not only to the consumer, but to the airport.
And when we're talking about NEC Corporation of America, I would imagine that a lot of people listening all around the world will immediately think of multinational information and communications technology company and the work that you do, but maybe not too aware of the role that NEC is playing in enhancing travel experiences. So can you elaborate on NEC's role in enhancing those customer experiences through innovations like travel verification service and other biometric tools that they may see but not necessarily associate with yourselves?
Yeah, so it's a complex environment at the airport. Again, as we've discussed, there's not only the airport, there are the airlines, the retailers, there's some hospitality or third-party stakeholders, as I called them. But a lot of what we're doing is helping to broker some of that information in the background between those key stakeholders to help data get to the right places. For example, if we're traveling on a Star Alliance carrier, we want that identity to be shareable via a device and consent that a consumer is able to make to share that information. And then we're also really trying to engage in some other areas like consumer content. So one of the other key areas for customer experience in these airports is how can they have proactive, dynamic, and unique information that is presented not only on a consumer's device, but maybe on some screens throughout the airport to enable and facilitate some of their travels. So based on preferences, as an example, how could a traveler leave the United States, land in Germany, transit in Germany, and end up in Asia, as an example, without having any disruption in terms of where they need to go? Again, fast tracking through gates, since they are in transit, the airport would know that information and be able to assign, based on that identity, specific lanes that he or she may be able to get through immigration quickly and board their next flight. All the while, the consumer is very well informed about where those places they need to be are and how long the wait might be. And in the background, the government, through that brokering of information, the government is also very well informed and has that data proactively in a digital format to eliminate as much of the manual processing as possible.
And here in the UK this week, as we record this podcast, there's been a lot of talk about facial recognition eventually replacing passports at UK airport e-gates. And it's things like this excite and make people a little bit cautious. So on that side of things, can you just expand on the importance of things like government frameworks and why they're essential in ensuring a more responsible deployment and use of biometric systems in airports, of course?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a really great question. I mean, I think it's probably one of the most important yet complex things, right? And we're talking about international travel. You're talking about multiple governments who have different positions on how they would handle privacy and how they want a person's information to be shared or used. So those are a lot of the kind of things that are happening in the background between governments and organizations like ICAO, where there are working groups. And traditionally, there was much less velocity in terms of speed for how long these things needed to take, right? So more specifically, if you're talking about a passport, that could take 3 years to change one thing in an MRZ page that everybody agreed on. And today with technology, it's moving at a much, much faster pace, which is a big challenge for governments to move at those paces and really be able to, do the level of due diligence that's required to share information in standard formats and those data pieces. But that being said, I think there's a lot of will, there's a lot of way for those governments. Obviously, with the digitalization of it all, it also represents a real cost savings and is a way that they can actually improve security as well. Because, for example, if you're looking for a particular person who may be traveling internationally, it used to be if the passport was valid, then that person had a valid way to travel. Whereas with digital identities being properly shared between governments, they would have a much more proactive way to address some of those traditional issues in the space. And the other key thing that I really want to mention here is it's very important that governments align with the fact that, and I think they are by and large in most cases, it really needs to be intuitive and transparent for a consumer to know what information is being used and how it's being used and where it's being processed from a privacy standpoint. And there are some interesting standards out. I think the EU was the first with GDPR. I think there are a number of drafts in the works at various governments that are probably based in large part on that framework. And I think it will progress, like I said, at probably a quicker pace than it has traditionally. Does that answer your question?
It does. And there is so much around this. And again, a lot of areas that people listening may be unfamiliar with. And NEC, as I said earlier, is such a leading in providing biometric tools for airports all around the world. But I think it's also important to highlight, this is not just tech for tech's sake. So you're trying to solve some of these problems that we've all encountered at airports, shaking our head after a long red-eye flight. So for people listening, again, can you expand on how technologies like facial recognition, fingerprint scans, and so forth are actually increasing security and efficiency and improving those experiences for passenger travel?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a great example. One of our key customers here in the United States has been Delta Airlines, and they were what I'll call one of the first adopters where the U.S. government proactively became engaged in how they could use biometrics for international travel. And the real key was not only to improve customer experience through faster boarding processes, but also close that security gap because they could use those digital identities in the background across Department of State and immigration, et cetera. But what was really interesting that came out of it was the airlines really grasped onto it because with those digital identities and authentication of documents in an automated way in the background, no one actually has to bring their passport out. Nobody has to bring a boarding pass out because using that biometric information, which is very, very unique that they already had on file, they could then use someone's face, which could be captured in 2 milliseconds, and at the same time authenticate his or her passport and a boarding pass. So what that really also offered the airlines was an improved customer experience also, because they could then engage with the customer instead of being concerned with validating the passport and ensuring that it wasn't in fact a valid secure document and the person's boarding pass was valid and they're getting on the right flight. So eliminating a lot of those administrative tasks has really enabled there to be another level of engagement with the customer while also providing improved security for not only the governments, but also the airlines in an automated way. So that was kind of the first example. And that's really taken over the past 4.5 to 5 years since that originally started. It's really, the momentum is huge right now in the worldwide, where people are really in governments and consumer expectation, again, as we mentioned before, are really, really seeking this type of automation.
And on behalf of security experts listening, I think recently or the last few years in Estonia, a hacker famously stole, I think it was 286,000 ID scans from government systems. And in India, there was their pioneering biometric digital identification system that was hacked. 815 million citizens and passport records were sold on the dark web. But considering the sensitive nature of biometric data and some of those examples I've shared there, a question I've got to ask is, how at NEC do you ensure privacy and security of passengers' information while implementing these technologies? Because I suspect it's a question you get a lot, right?
Without a doubt, and that is a question we should get a lot. I mean, people should ask those types of questions when you're talking about these sensitive pieces of data, right? So first and foremost, at the highest level, I mean, we really endeavor to design everything with privacy by design. So what that really means is from concept to product, every step of the way, we are developing and architecting systems so that we're ensuring the highest, best security standards that we can. And part of that is we really do have to have the white hacker type perspective as well. So what if someone does access a system via X, Y, or Z method? What type of information would they be able to get, and ensure that we don't allow that to happen? So down at the lower level security, we're never sending raw images of people across any open Wi-Fi or cellular network. We template things into a representation of that image so that it's in a hashed string, basically. So even if someone were able to get a hold of it, they wouldn't have a person's image. We do not send a full passenger's information along with their biometric information. Those are separate files. We store things separately. Typically, we're encrypting things at rest even. So it's a very, very important part of our responsibility as a vendor and a solution provider to the marketplace that we take very, very seriously. We've actually opened an office at NEC headquarters as well, a transparency office to not only address biometrics, but AI and some of the other sensitive things that we do so that people can have a much better understanding for how our technology works and how we process data and some of those key questions. And again, I would absolutely encourage not only the consumer, but decision makers to ask those hard questions of any good vendor. They'll have a probably a better answer than you might expect.
And I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in implementing biometric systems in airports, and how have you at NEC overcome some of these challenges? And of course, I don't expect you to name any names at all, but I just wonder if there's any use cases or stories or that you could share with us today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll speak in generalities, but honestly, the biggest challenge we have is ensuring that there's coordination in any environment that we're going into, because again, an airport is a very complex environment, which has government authorities, the airlines, as we mentioned, consumers, retail, and then within each one of those organizations, there are kind of sub-entities who probably have a stake in any sort of technology being used. So we really try to spend a lot of time up front understanding not only the business problem, but also ensuring that it's a win for everybody, or at least doesn't present some sort of a vulnerability for people because they weren't included in initial conversations. Because it is much more complex than people probably realize in almost all cases. It's not just putting some face capture devices out into an airport and you've got a solution. All of those things that we've discussed today are key discussion topics. At a more operational level, what we're really probably also most concerned with are communication types and how data is going to be used across the network. So more specifically, one of the really interesting technologies that we're really focused on is 5G these days, which not only do we do as a company, but it offers consumers and customers at the airport a not only a larger amount of bandwidth, but also it allows them a cheaper way to get a very good technology network infrastructure in place, because you don't necessarily have to pull a lot of fiber optic cabling and some things like that, as an example of some interesting technology that's being used that we're focused on. But I would say the coordination piece is probably the most important part that we have to deal with and spend most of our time in. And then the other piece, again, is really trying to simplify our perspective in terms of what's going to be of value for a consumer, right? Again, expectations are high. We all have mobile devices. We all have 100 apps or so on our phones that have varying degrees of intuitiveness and design features that are maybe great or some not so good. So we really try to ensure that anything that's touching the consumer side is, again, intuitive, easy to use, somewhat language independent, because those are also key concerns. And at the end of the day, the benefit has to be there for not only an airport, an airline, but most importantly, the consumer who's spending all of the money needs to get value and be able to use the technology seamlessly and easily.
And I'm curious, as a company that has been leading the way in this field for so long, where do you go from here? Are there any other innovations or developments in biometric technology that you anticipate could further revolutionize the aviation industry? And how are you preparing to contribute to some of these advancements? Again, you're probably locked down to a lot of this stuff, but is there anything you can share about what excites you about the road ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a little bit vague, but yeah, I mean, we're absolutely very excited about the future. With the advancements in technology, we're seeing leaps and bounds in terms of sensors and their costs and their ability to be included in part of an airport infrastructure versus a capital buy piece of equipment that's sitting out in the middle of passenger operations, as an example. So embedding some of those devices so that they're almost transparent to a consumer who is using biometrics, but they don't have to disrupt their process. So things like at speed walking through some of those facilitated travel lanes for pre-vetted passengers, as an example. But also what really presents a lot of interest for us is fused algorithms when it comes to biometrics. So there are a number of different biometrics in that have been well proven in the market, and using a multitude of those for these transactions presents some really unique opportunities. So things like body detection, face, iris, and it also allows opportunity for consumers to scale their security posture. So rather than just getting one, like a face, for example, you could now be required to get face and iris in a high security environment type scenario. But the other interesting thing is some of these same technologies can be expanded into other use cases, not only at the airport, but outside of the airport, which really presents a unique value proposition for a consumer to use a biometric identity to secure these business transactions. So, for example, entering a stadium, purchasing alcohol, making sure that a person is 21 or older. And again, having that capability without a bunch of devices that people have to interact with in a seamless, automated way is where we're really doubling down, right? So things like cloud, using the AI and machine learning so that it can be truly automated in the background to benefit the consumer and the government and airlines and others as well.
And I suspect along the way you have picked up more than a few stories in your career and from your time earning your stripes in the field of tech. So before I let you go, I'm going to have a bit of fun with you. What's the funniest or most interesting story that has happened in your career? Is there anything you are able to share there?
The funniest or most interesting in terms of consumer or
anything or in your career of tech, your tech career?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I've been in biometrics for many years. Started in the consulting world initially on more of the economics and business analysis side, and came to really start specializing in it about 15 years ago. And one of the things that made me a true believer was early on, I was working on a pilot with customers and Customs and Border Protection and Delta Airlines, as I mentioned. And we actually, while on site doing one of these pilots to prove the technology, we actually identified two twins who were traveling on the same identity somehow.
Wow.
The system identified those people, and we were able to alert the government, and they were able to intervene. So that was a really interesting time for me to say, wow, these are identical twins standing here. We didn't even notice. And the technology was able to identify that. So it was a really impactful moment for me in my career.
Wow, what an incredible story. And I suspect we have set off a few light bulb moments in people listening all around the world, maybe some people in aviation or the airports, etc., or people just interested in finding out more about the kind of work that you do. So for those people listening, where would you like to point them, especially if they've got any questions they want to ask around this kind of technology as well? Where would you like to send everyone?
Sure. Yeah, you can Google NEC America and certainly come to our website and see a number of our different technologies. And there are some links there that consumers can then, if you want to submit an inquiry or anything like that, they will eventually get to me.
Excellent. Well, I'll add a link to that so people can find you nice and easily. But I love chatting with you today. We covered so much in a short amount of time, from how airport biometric use is growing in response to both market demand and direction from government, the role of digital identity tools, how it can add new conveniences to travel, and of course, your traveller verification service and so many other innovations, and that growing role that you've got in enhancing customer experiences with technology. Love talking about it. I'd love to get you back on later in the year, find out how that world is evolving for you. But thanks for joining me today.
Neil, thank you for your time. It was really my pleasure, and I'm happy to follow up anytime.
So a huge thank you to Jason for joining us and sharing his invaluable insights into the digital transformation of travel. And the conversation today for me highlighted the immense potential of biometric technology and enhancing airport experiences, but while also emphasising the critical importance of privacy and standardisation in these systems. And it's clear that as we embrace digital identities, the collaboration between the private sector and government agencies, that's going to be paramount in shaping secure, efficient and user-friendly travel. Quite a balance, but they seem to be doing it just right. So thank you for tuning in today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that we talked about. Maybe you think we've missed something. techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. Nice and easy to find. But that's it for today. So I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, reminding you, stay curious. Stay informed about the latest technological changes that are reshaping our world. And hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow or next time for another enlightening discussion on how technology is solving real-world problems. So thank you for listening, and until we speak again, keep embracing innovation in every step of your journey.